visitors coming over and entertaining visitors, are you going to have a basin for them to wash their feet? Anybody going to be doing feet washing at your house? Sister Paulette? No. So why would they do it here? Say that louder. That's exactly right, Sister Cheryl. They're traveling, and they don't have cement to walk on. They're traveling on dusty roads. So it's always a timing whenever they entertain guests, they would have foot washing, and they have basins. You will see this in Jesus' miracle, his first miracle, turning water into wine. And when you see Jesus turning water into wine, boy, I promise you, this I'm trying to hold myself from preaching. My God, from glory. Woo, I got excited just thinking about the water. There were water basins, and the water basins sit 6 feet high. Now, I'm 6'2", so these water basins are high. So you have these water basins, and all these guests are coming to the marriage feast. See, one thing will help you understand the next one. And they would have places for when these people arrive to wash their feet. So they out of wine. And Mary goes to Jesus and says to him, we're out of wine. And Jesus says to his mother, this ain't my hour. Why are you asking me? And Mary looked, I think she might have been a little colored. Because you got to be careful what you say to black mamas. And Mary says, whatever he tells you to do, do it. She didn't even reply to Jesus. She's seen him as the son at that point. And she says to him, she says to them, whatever he tells you to do, do it. And Jesus tells the disciples, fill up the water basins. Now remember, these are water basins for dirty feet. You cannot ever go and think that God can't use anything to fix anything. Now, ordinarily, we would say water basins don't belong in the kitchen. That's nasty. Jesus told them, go and fill up these water basins, because out of this dirty thing, I'm going to bring something pure. And so he tells them, fill up the water basins. And he makes the best wine there was. Now, how do I know that? They took it to the servant, and they asked the question, why would you save the best for last? In their custom, they put the best out first. And he said, y'all save the best for last. Jesus used dirty basins that was used for dirty feet to bless some people who had the best to come out of it. Please stop thinking that God can't use anything and anybody. God will use anybody. Quit sitting around thinking they ain't good enough. God used the basins. And you know what? God is using basins still. So they washed their feet. I had to pull myself out of preach. I did. That took a lot of work. So they washed their feet, and he says to them, and you're right, and Judas is sitting there. He says, one of you shall betray me. Now, what is the reply of the disciples? They want to know who. And in particular, Peter, the scriptures tells us, is sitting next to Jesus. And he says to Jesus, just tell me who. Now, remember, this is the same Peter that was with Jesus when he got arrested. And he pulled out a sword and took off the man's whole ear. I think the whole side of his face, and Jesus put it back on. Peter was basically saying, this is my vernacular, tell me who it is, I take care of him. He said, I jack him up. Peter's gangster. He's gangster. And Jesus says, Peter, the one I give and dip this and give it to, that's the one. This is all necessary to understand chapter 14. You got to see what's happening in the story. And all throughout the story, you see Peter and the disciples sitting with Jesus having dinner. And he says, the one that I give this to, that's the one. And The Bible says no sooner than Jesus gave it to him, there's something that happened. He said immediately a spirit entered into him. Oof. And he says to Judas, Judas, whatever you do it quickly. He said, get on about your business. I know you the one that you're going to let the devil use. And this is one who walked with Jesus. This is one who watched Jesus do miracles, signs and wonders. Everybody who say they walk with Jesus, Jesus ain't walking with them. All right? So now Peter has another problem. Because Jesus now is saying, I have to wash your feet. And Peter says, no, I have to wash your feet. And he says to Peter, Peter, and all the disciples, you have to allow me to share this kind of love. And the kind of love I share with you is the kind of love you have to share. And Jesus leaves the disciples with this message. Now, we kind of hit it last week. And here's what we said, they call it the golden rule. And that is, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is what? Golden rule. Love your neighbor as yourself. But in chapter 13, Jesus says something different. He said, love each other as I have loved you. And the problem with this is I really haven't met anybody that really matches Jesus' kind of love. Well, how do you know? Who you willing to die for? Okay, well, I guess that ended that. So now we move over to chapter 14 because all of them are trying to figure out, where, Jesus, are you going? Because we've been living together. We've been staying together. Where are you going? What's happening with you? Now go back into chapter 14, and it'll give you enlightenment because they're now wondering what is happening with Jesus. Now we notified the key people that are in the text. We notified that. And Jesus starts off verse 14 because they're saying, we want to go where you're going. Just tell us where you're going. And so now they question him because they don't know where he's going. Now let's go and read chapter 14, verse 1. Now that you got the context, verse 1, what does it say? Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me. So Jesus is telling them, I got to go. I'm going somewhere. And where I am, you can't go right now. So the 12 has been with him. They've been traveling with him. They've been eating with him. They watched him do miracles. They watched him raise the dead. They watched him heal the sick. They watched him touch the Bible calls him the maniac, the one who had lost his mind. They watched him go to the sepulcher, and the man who had been cutting himself, they watched him throw out the spirits, and the spirit says, why are you here? And they said, permit us to go into the swine. They watched Jesus do all of this, and now he's saying he's going away. And he says to his disciples, let not your heart be troubled. The question to everybody in the room, what do you think the disciples are feeling right now? What do you think is happening with them? They stressed out? Anybody else? Anxiety. Abandonment. They feeling there's going to be some abandonment. And so now they worried. They're stressed. They have anxiety going on because of what Jesus told them in chapter 13. And the text is right there. And so now what we have going on here is he's telling them, listen, don't be stressed out. Don't be worried. It is necessary in this day and time, we have to remind even saints, don't be worried. Don't be stressed. I've been teaching on a Bible study out on 30th Street and been dealing with the sovereignty of God. God is in control. I'm guilty. I ain't ready to beat up on nobody but myself. I'm guilty of worrying about stuff that I know Jesus is sovereign about. He's controlling, but yet we still worry. And it's a necessity that we tell everybody from time to time. Stop stressing over it. God's got it. And so Jesus is doing the same thing. Yes, ma'am. Talk to me. Please.
I was hearing what everybody was saying, but one of the main things Jesus told them that he was going to die.
Yes. And they're perplexed about it.
Right.
Because
I didn't hear anyone say it, and I'm like, that might have been the main thing that really made them, stressed out, because he told them that he was going to die.
he said, I'm going away. Right. And they all like, wait a minute, where are you going? Well, who's that? He says, he's telling them, I got to die. And Peter's like, I'll kill him. That's the exact words Peter's at. That's important to note. Yep. I'm about to go. Bewildered. Yeah, well, what's going on? It just happened all of a sudden. All of this is happening right away. And it's depressing for him. He's washing their feet, they having dinner, and you tell her I'm about to die. It's not a good thing. And it just happened so suddenly. Last night I was called out to the hospital, and I was at 2 different hospitals. I had to go to Methodist and then rush back to Community East. And I'm at the one that somebody had a stroke and an aneurysm all at the same time. I'm like, my God. And I get out there to go pray for them, and when I get there, they said, they took them in procedure. They have swelling on the brain. And so the family is sitting there, and it all happened unexpectedly. And I want to tell everybody in here, whatever you're going through that God brought you through, that story isn't just for you. You got to be prepared to tell somebody. So I'm walking in the room, and the family's sitting there in the waiting room, and they're crying and boo-hooing. And it's like, this just happened all suddenly. And I just started testifying. I said, I've been there. I've been in a coma. I done had the stroke. But look at me. I don't look like what I've been through. And the same God that healed me is the same God that can heal her too. And it eased their pain. But I prayed with the family, what have you. I left from there, ran out to Community East. And there was another young man, was just at church out there on 30th Street. And the family called me in. I came in, I said, let me get in the room, pray for them. They said they only allowed 6 in. I said, okay, well, I'm clergy, so maybe I can get in. And they finally looked at me, never told anybody over the phone to tell me. I'm getting in. They said he's already gone. 41 years old. That's troubling. My night didn't end very well with a smile on my face. I mean, this comes with the part of pastoring. And it was tough. And so you pray for people. So these people are sitting there, and this young man yesterday was at work on a forklift, fell off. They tried to revive him. They called the paramedics. When he got to the hospital, he was already gone. Just suddenly. So unexpected. The distraughtness that the family was experiencing. I could feel their pain. It's very distraught in spirit. This is where these disciples are. They're distraught. They're like, man, we weren't expecting this. We're having dinner, and you gonna give us this bad news? And Jesus follows it up with, stop worrying. Don't let your heart be troubled. And he flipped it from him. He said, if you believe in God, believe also in me. What else does it say? Go back to verse 2. Watch this. In my Father's house are many mansions. You done already read into it, didn't you? In my Father's house are many mansions. And he says what? If it were not so, I would have told you. Now, watch this. And he's telling him, said, don't worry about it. Where I am, I'm preparing it for you, but I got to go to prepare it. This is what, who's writing this? Who's the writer? John. That's necessary to know. So he's saying, listen, I got to go away. I got to prepare this place. In my Father's house are many mansions. Now, here's one of the mistakes we make is, as Floyd has said, this is in Jerusalem. Where's Jerusalem? Anybody? geographically. Say that again. He's elevated. And, well, at this point, he's in Jerusalem. That's in the Middle East. And he's about to leave. But he's speaking to them and said, in my Father's house are many mansions. You got to stop and really question what he says. And it's the word mansion. And oftentimes what we do in the West, this is written in the East. We interpret this from a Western perspective. And we just think because what it means here, that's what it means there. Jesus is confronting something different. He said, in my Father's house are many mansions. And you have to look at this word mansion based on what it means there. Here, we interpret a mansion to mean a really big house. And based on American standards, a mansion starts at 9,000 square feet. That's how big, that's a big house. And they can go up from there. Out there off of 116th and Olio Road, I've been around there and they had mansions, I promise you, 20,000 square feet. And I'm just looking like, who need this much house? It's huge. And so what we think a mansion is not the same thing that Jesus is confronting. A mansion in the East is another word for apartment or townhouse. Yeah. And so what we've been running around saying is, I got a mansion in the sky. You have an apartment. Interpretation is so important because we leave running with interpretations that are different over there than they are here. And so we think God's got a mansion in the sky for me. This is not what Jesus is saying. He's confronting the culture of the East and Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, or in Hebrew or Jewish custom, when a father starts his family, he starts it small. And every time one of his children get married, they build and add on to it. Jacob, when he had 12 sons, he had 12 apartments all connected. That was their mansion. But when their children start having children, their father had to add on apartment to the house too. So all he's saying is God has built a room for you. And where I'm going, I got to prepare your room. Now here's the thing we got to watch. What other scriptures did John write? What other books? 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. Revelations. Now you got to go to Revelations because John didn't understand what Jesus was talking about. Not until he was out on the island of Patmos. And God had to reveal to him what he's saying. Go to chapter 22 of Revelations. No, start at 21 real quick. We got to roll through this. Chapter 21, a book of Revelations. And here in the book of Revelations, this same John that writes the gospel is cast on an island called Patmos. And the island of Patmos is a place that's on the outcast. Nothing is there. They put John out there because he wouldn't stop preaching and talking about Jesus. So this is going to be John's farewell, death-defying death for him. We're casting you off, and we're going to leave you by yourself. Separation. And while he's out there on this island, God gives him visions. Now, you got to watch it now. Starting at verse 1, chapter 21 of Revelations. What does it say? I saw a new heaven and a new earth. Read. For the first heaven and the first earth has passed away, and there's no more sea. Read. All right. I heard some mumbling going on. I don't know if y'all quite said it. We fell apart. All right, start at verse 2. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Whew. Read on. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. And God himself shall be with them and be their God. Go to chapter 22. I want you to just watch. Verse 1. And he showed me a what? Pure river of water, of life. Read. Clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. Verse 2. And on the either side of the river was there the tree of life, which bears manner of fruits, and yield her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were the healing of the nations. Now you really have to put this together. John is with Jesus in chapter 14, and they're thinking, when he says, I have to go prepare a place for you, and there where I am, you can be also. In my Father's house are many mansions. John has got the concept of what they experience on earth. But it's in the book of Revelations, John is being able to receive from God something his eyes never seen before. And God is showing him exactly what's going to happen. Notice again, I asked the question, where are they? Said Jerusalem. In chapter 22, he says, I see coming down from heaven a city, New Jerusalem. One of the things that we have to understand is whatever concept we have of what is going to be like when God takes us home, multiply it by 100 millionth of a trillionth. I don't even know what number that is. And that's how much better it's going to be than you could ever begin to realize. So in this chapter 22, John starts saying, I see streets of gold, transparent. Anybody ever seen transparent gold? I've never seen transparent gold. And John says transparent gold. I believe what John was seeing, there were no human terms to really explain it. So he had to explain it as best he could in his own language. But it was better than what he saw. He didn't really have an explanation for it. Notice what he says here in the text, and I need us to watch it. Verse 2. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life. Question. When did we see the tree of life before then? Genesis. Absolutely right. And where was it? In the middle of the garden. It is for us to know and understand. And there was I don't know if everybody remembered, I know most of us on this side may, Elder Manson Clark. Y'all know him? He was my wife's grandfather. And every time you see Elder Manson Clark, he gonna only read one book and only have one thing to say to us about, and that was the book of Genesis. Anybody know? Man, he was always talking about the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis. And everybody was like, man, do you read any other book? He said, no, you got to go back to the beginning. And as I grew and learned, I found out Elder Clark was right. And what we must understand is we're still in the book of Genesis. Day 7 has not happened. We are still in the middle of creation. My question is, when did Jesus rest? We're in the 6th day. That's exactly right, sir. We're still over there. And it was always in God's design. Go with me to Genesis 1. You're right. That's the other place we saw it in Genesis. Go with me to Genesis 1. And start at verse 26. Genesis 1 and 26. I thought we was in John 14. We're explaining what Jesus is saying. Genesis chapter 1. Elder Clark never got out of the book of Genesis. We laughed at him and everything. And I come to find out, man, Elder Clark was right about some stuff. Verse 26. Shall we all read? And God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and let them have dominion. Don't run past that word. It was always in God's ideal, and neither has God gotten away from it, that man was supposed to have dominion in the earth. The other word for dominion is the word kingdom. Yes, sir. Domain. Exactly. And he made man for a reason. Now let's read past that verse. Floyd, you own it. Shall we read? Verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female. He created he them. God created man for a reason and placed him in the garden as for dominion. This word dominion means domain, a place. God always, in his mind, intended for man to rule the earth. It was always in God's mind. Go throughout, bypass the book of Genesis, go to the historical books, the books of Kings, the books of Samuel, 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah. They were always fighting. Israel's always fighting. And what were they fighting for? Why was Israel always in a fight? Land, territory, power that was rightfully theirs. God gave them land. So then, when you see this, I hope this isn't too confusing. The Bible's like a puzzle you have to systematically put together. And you have to see what Jesus is after and saying. So he's telling them, look at Israel, always in a fight over land, constantly. And Israel asked God for something that broke his heart. What was it? A king. Why did it break his heart? He's the king, absolutely. He said, I'm the king. Every kingdom has a king. He says, I'm your king, and I'm giving you this land. And as long as you have me, you lose nothing. As soon as you separate from me, you lose everything. And so constantly what God is establishing is, I'm going to have me a people, and I want you to rule the earth. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Go back and look at Revelations. In the book of Revelations, and even before we get there, from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus preached one message. And that's it. Thank you. Oh, Pastor, you're absolutely right. He only preaches on the kingdom. He's preaching constantly about the kingdom. And that's the message the church has to embrace. Always it is in God's mind to establish in the earth a people to rule the earth, and he is going to be king of the dominion. So when man messes it up, God has not abandoned his purpose. He goes back into Revelations, and John sees coming down out of heaven a new city, a new creation. He's king of it all, and is better than anything we've ever seen in this life. He says, I'm getting rid of the old heaven and the old earth. And John says, I see coming down out of something new, a city. And so what's the big idea here now? The big ideal of what he's saying in John 14 when he talks about the mansion, it's really not mansion, it's a city. What city? He says, I'm literally giving everybody a city. And in this city, John talks about how large the floors are from each other. And he's saying 14 million miles from one floor to the next floor. Anybody ever been in a place that had that much room and floors? Can't even imagine it, can you? I can't. It's better than what we think. And he's literally telling John, John, what I told you in 14, listen to what I'm telling you in 22. And 14, he didn't have the vision. Revelations 22, he's starting to see this thing now. God has got a new heaven and a new earth. Well, who's going to be on it? New people. What new people? People who walks in my image and after my likeness. The very thing he did to Adam in Genesis chapter 1 is the very thing he's doing with us now. That's why we have to have the Spirit. Yes, Lord. He's recreating this thing again. He still hasn't abandoned his purpose. The difference with this new world, separate from this world, what is the difference? He tells John in Revelations chapter 21, I'm going to bind Satan in a seal. That's the difference between that world and this one. Satan's not bound. And he's loosed. But in this new city called Jerusalem, my God, it's going to be better. Here's another word. Elder Jefferson and I had this conversation one day this week about the word paradise. When Jesus is with the thief on the cross, and he says, this day shall you be with me in paradise. As you look at the word paradise, another word for paradise is Eden. Eden was the place that God placed us all in. There will be no more death, no sickness, nothing we ever have to work for. Everything that Adam had in Eden is now what God has given us in this new mansion, this new place, in this new city. So when he's talking to the disciples in John chapter 14, he said, don't let your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. What are you talking about? I'm building y'all a city that y'all have never seen is better than the garden. And this time when I place y'all in this place, y'all going to be just like me. This is what he said. And when you get there, there will be no comparison to anything you've ever seen. And this is what John 14 is after. Is this helping? Does this make sense? When he says, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would not have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you shall be also. He says, well, show us the way. And here's what, when he created Adam, the scripture says in chapter 1 of the book of Genesis, verse between 26 to 29, and he breathed into Adam, and Adam became what? A living soul. And that word breath is the same word Holy Ghost in Acts 2. Literally, he breathed into Adam's spirit himself. So now we ask the question, and I said this, some of y'all were there. I didn't know y'all was in the audience Sunday. I said, no, we're not getting wings. We're not going to be angels. There's nothing to support that. So let's go to another part of John. 1 John chapter 2. Am I getting in trouble in here tonight? Bible got a backup Bible. John chapter 2, 1 John, not St. John. No, let's see. Yeah, I want 1 John chapter 3. Verse 2, what does that say? Beloved, now are we the sons of God. Watch this. And it does not yet appear what we shall be or become. Well, oh, don't mumble with it. What does it say? When he shall appear. But we know that what? When he shall appear, we shall be what? Like him. We shall see him as he is. Now you go back and look at Revelations 21 and 22. John is saying the same thing. If you look at Genesis chapter 1, he says, I made him in my image and after my likeness. And it just makes me magnify more and more what David said in Psalm 8 and 4. What is man that thou art mindful of him? He's not, he don't think we even good enough to be angels. We have to be like him. And so the question becomes, what is he like? You have to go back to the resurrection. What was he when he got out of the grave? Anybody ever read what Jesus was when he came out of the grave? What was he like?
Glorified body. Yeah, glorified body.
Glorified body. And there were those who went to touch him, and he says what? Can't touch me. He's glorified. Literally, what Jesus was when he got up is what we shall become. We will not be angels. We shall be like him. And we're going to have something that Moses could not have. Moses says to God, show me your face. He says, no man can look at my face and live. He said, but I'll put my hands over your face and you can see my back parts. But in Revelations and in this text here of 1 John 3, he says, you'll be able to see me. My God. So when he says, I go to prepare a place for you, it's just not a place to dwell. He's literally making us just like him. My question to y'all, can he die? Can he get sick? Can he go away? Will he ever be depressed? Will there ever be anxiety? This is the hope that we have in Jesus. This is what we celebrate. We're just passing through. What are you happy about? I'm going to be like him. Lord have mercy. So don't let your heart be troubled. Blessed are they that die in the Lord. We have a whole new, if we had hope in this life only, Paul said, we'd be of all men most miserable. We're not miserable. How do you know? I'm going to be like Jesus. We're not even good enough to be an angel. They ain't got no wings. We're not no seraphim, celestial. No, we're going to be like Jesus. That is incredible. So when you look at John 14, verses 1 through 14, he's giving console. He's consoling the disciples. Stop worrying. Don't let your heart be troubled. You've been believing God. You've been believing in him, talking about him. Then believe in me too. And they like Thomas and Philip, well, where's the Father at? And Jesus says, hold on, I'm the theophany. When you see me, you see God. Who is Jesus? He's God made known and revealed to us. You have been with me this long and you still don't know me. It's nothing more depressing than folk who walk around with you and after so many years still don't know who you are. My God. You know what I love about Jesus? And he kept revealing to himself. I'm stopping y'all. John 14 is just amazing to me. Here's what's amazing. There was a man who was blind. And he was blind and Jesus spit in the dirt, made clay, and put it on the man's eyes. And everybody looking and saying, ugh. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of germs in spit. But this man said, listen, I'm blind. If you can heal me, do whatever you can do. Now, here's my question. Why did Jesus spit and make clay? No, you're right. That's creation. What did you say, Pastor? He made man from clay. And what he's showing man, I made those eyes from clay. I'm going to make some new eyes from clay and put him in his face. He's telling them, I'm the same person from Genesis that's doing this in your face now. I'm God who created out of clay humanity. I'm the same God that's going to recreate his eyes from the same thing I made you from. He's saying, I'm God. There's no qualm with who Jesus is. My God, right there. And he created the man's new eyes, told him to go wash. And everybody's looking and amazing. This man came out seeing. Why did he use clay? Because that's what he made us from. He went back to the same source that he made us from and turned around and made some more eyes. I'm telling you, whatever you've been through, God recreated. And so what Jerusalem is a better Eden. It's a better paradise. And he says, I see it coming down. God's intention is still for him to rule. God bless y'all. God bless you. Keep reading this stuff, y'all, and keep